What is a paragraph? Do you know that most pieces of writing require more than one paragraph? Mastering the art of writing paragraphs is essential to get success in any form of writing, whether it is a letter, a report, a newspaper article, or any piece of academic writing that you do in the course of your studies. In these longer pieces of writing, paragraphs generally introduce new ideas to develop the central theme. The division into paragraphs also prevents boredom as it provides a physical break on the page. You know a paragraph is unified by a central, controlling idea or theme. This idea or theme is called the topic of the paragraph. It is sometimes expressed at some place in the paragraph by one sentence, which is usually called the topic sentence. You can write the topic sentence in the form of a statement or even a problem. This topic sentence you can either write in the beginning of a paragraph, or at the end, or even in the middle of the paragraph. Very often you can find that there may not be a topic sentence in a paragraph, but it may be implied within the paragraph. Check your progress 1. Identify the topic of the paragraph and the topic sentence in the paragraph given below. The vast majority of people, wherever they live and whatever their occupation, come in contact with animals in one way or another and have to deal with them. It is obvious that the hunter has to know the ways of his quarry, that the farmer must be aware of the habits of his farmyard animals and of creatures that damage his crops, that the fisherman must know when and where to find his fish and how to outwit them. Even the modern city dweller meets animals. He may want to ward off the roaches in his kitchen, or he may keep a dog or a bird and grow familiar with the way his pet behaves. All over the world, among primitive tribes as well as in modern society, there are those who delight in the observation of animals, and there is a growing awareness of the fact that sharing our world with our fellow creatures is like traveling together. We enjoy being surrounded by other beings who, like ourselves, are deeply absorbed in the adventure of living. There is a growing sense of marvel and also of affinity. When you begin a paragraph with a topic sentence, it helps both the writer and the reader. As a writer, you will have less difficulty in constructing a unified paragraph because you will relate every sentence to the topic sentence and the central idea it expresses. Moreover, your reader will know immediately what the paragraph is about because the opening sentence states the central idea. If you write the topic sentence at the end, then the advantage is that all the sentences build up to this topic sentence and the conclusion becomes more effective. However, placing the topic sentence at the end or in the middle is a more difficult skill. Developing the topic. In order to develop the central theme of a paragraph, you have to expand the idea contained in the topic sentence. This you can do by adding more information, explanation, examples, illustrations, etc. to the idea you have expressed in the topic sentence. If you read the paragraph given in Check Your Progress 1 again, you will notice that this paragraph is developed mainly by adding examples, and it can be analyzed as follows. 1. Topic sentence. The vast majority of people, wherever they live and whatever their occupation, come in contact with animals in one way or another and have to deal with them. 2. Examples given to develop the paragraph. A. The hunter. B. The farmer. C. The fisherman. D. The city dweller. 3. Summing up. This is done by stating that there is a common bond between humans and other creatures. Coherence. When you look at different paragraphs, each paragraph is developed slightly depending upon the information that you want to convey to the reader. Moreover, when you write a paragraph of your own, choose the topic and write down all the points that you know about the topic. As you make your list, do not stop to question whether a detail fits or not. Any of the points that do not fit can be removed later. This will help you generate new ideas, and also give you something concrete to work on. However, when you start writing, see that every sentence contributes to the central idea, which is contained in the topic sentence. Only then your paragraph will have unity. Also, to have unity in your paragraph, you need to understand that other than topic sentences and supporting details, the sentences which support the topic sentence, it should be coherent. In a coherent paragraph, you as a writer take the reader logically and smoothly from one idea to the next. The reader must clearly recognize that sentence logically leads to the next. Cohesion. Another technique which brings about coherence in a paragraph is the use of cohesive devices or signal words or signposts between sentences or at the beginning of sentences. These words, phrases will help you as a writer to move smoothly from one sentence to the next and show logical relationship between sentences. It is explained in the example below. Example: man has been able to spread across the earth so widely for four main reasons. First, he is a terrestrial animal, and not restricted to forest. Secondly, he can cross any natural barriers, such as deserts, oceans and mountains. Moreover, he can live off a very wide variety of food. Most important of all, he has developed culture. He has learned to make clothes and build fires which allow him to live in climates where he would otherwise perish. To a large extent, he shares some of these advantages with monkeys. They, too, can move over unfrosted land. They too, can cross some natural barrier, as they have the ability to swim. And they too, can digest many kinds of food. Thus, a single species of baboon has spread across Africa from Dhaka in the west to Ethiopia in the east, and south all the way to the Cape of Good Hope. Similarly, macaques have done at least as well. One species, the rhesus macaque, is equally at home in forest, in open cultivated fields, and inside heavily populated cities. From Imel, S. and de Vos, I. eds. The Monkey's Success in the Trees in the Primates, Time Life Books. From the above example, it is clear for you that cohesive devices are like signposts in a paragraph. They enable us to follow the writer's line of thought by words that relate one idea to another. In the above example, the word phrases first, secondly, moreover, most important of all indicate the four main reasons why humans have been able to spread so widely across the earth. Most important of all shows that some reasons are more important than others. Similarly shows the relationship between the macaques and the baboons. The following list includes other words and phrases that function as cohesive devices, signal words, signposts. To express result, therefore, as a result, consequently, thus, hence. To give examples, for example, for instance, specifically, as an illustration. To express comparison, similarly, likewise. To express contrast, however, nevertheless, on the other hand. To express addition, moreover, furthermore, also, besides, in addition. To indicate time, now, later, meanwhile, since, then, after that, before that time. To express sequence, first, second, third, then, next, finally. Cohesive devices or signal words or signposts used to link sentences can also be effective for transition from one paragraph to another. You will study about that in detail in the coming unit. Organization of a paragraph. In the last section, you have read about how to develop the topic in a paragraph. Now you are going to deal in more detail with some of the principles observed in organizing paragraphs. These relate to chronological, time, sequencing, spatial relationships and class relationships. Chronological sequence. What do you understand by chronological sequencing? By chronological sequencing you need to know that you arrange the events in the order in which they occur in time, beginning with the first event, going on to the next event, and so on until you come to the last event. This is the method that you normally use when you tell a simple story, describe a process, report incidents and events, or write a biographical sketch. Biographical writing. When you write biographies, you will probably realize that the cues used to organize the biographical details chronologically are the dates mentioned in the text. You will find that most biographies are organized sequentially in a clear time frame, according to the dates of important events. Your daily lives are also generally organized in a similar fashion, where you see time moving in one direction, from the past to the present and from the present to the future. Yet, there are moments in your lives which are more important than others and which you tend to highlight. If you write about the events, you may break the natural chronological sequence to emphasize these occurrences. Narrative. In more complex pieces of writing, you can manipulate time if you wish. You can move backwards and forwards through time, according to the purpose in writing. In general, writers use unexpected chronological sequences when they want to emphasize something other than the time sequence, which is usually used by the writers when they use the narrative style of chronological sequence. In the passage given below, the writer has used such a complex time movement. Why do you think so? When you read the passage, you may realize that it is because he wants to highlight the happy and comfortable life of the protagonist and his family lived in the past, in contrast to the unfortunate circumstances they have fallen into now. Example: it was the same story everywhere. He returned home in the evening. His heart sank as he turned into his street behind the market. His wife would invariably be standing at the door with the children behind her, looking down the street. What anxious, eager faces they had. So much of trembling, hesitating hope that he would come back home with some magic fulfillment. As he remembered the futile way in which he searched for a job, and the finality with which people dismissed him, he wished that his wife and children had less trust in him. His wife looked at his face, understood and turned in without uttering a word. The children took the cue and filed in silently. Rama Rao tried to improve matters with a forced heartiness. Well, how are we all today? To which he received mumbling, feeble responses from his wife and children. It rent his heart to see them in this condition. There at the extension how this girl would sparkle with flowers and a bright dress. She had friendly neighbors, a women's club, and everything to keep her happy there. But now she hardly had the heart or the need to change in the evenings, for she spent all her time cooped up in the kitchen. The house in the extension had a compound and they romped with a dozen other children. It was possible to have numerous friends in the fashionable nursery school. But here the children had no friends, and could play only in the backyard of the house. Their shirts were beginning to show tears and frays. Formerly they were given new clothes once in 3 months. Rama Rao lay in bed and spent sleepless nights over it. From R. K. Narayan, Out of Business in an Astrologer's Day and Other Stories, Indian Thought Publications, Mysore. Now let us analyze the movement of time in the passage. The story begins at a particular time. He returned home in the evening, behind the market. It flashes in the past. His wife would invariably be standing at the door. He would come back home with magic fulfillment. In fact, here we see a complex use of different times. Rama Rao uses his knowledge of the past to anticipate the coming scene. Again we see a complex interplay of the past and the present. As he remembered the futile way in which he searched for a job, had less trust in him. Present time. His wife looked at his face, see them in this condition. When you write a composition involving chronological sequencing, the specific time expressions given below may help you work out the time relationships. These relationships, 1, mark a specific time, or 2, show the relationship between periods of time. 1. Specific time indicators. Just then, in those days, last Monday, in 1954, at the beginning of May, at 6 o'clock, 6 years ago. 2. Time sequences. A. Earlier time. I. Until then, he lived, she had lived, she had lived. E. By then. E. Up to that time. IV. Prior to. B. Same time. I. During this period, he fell ill. E. While working at. E. In the meantime. IV. At that moment. V. It was then that he. C. Later time. I. After this, he went. E. Subsequently. E. Afterwards. IV. Then. V. After a while. Vi. Later on. VII. Eventually. VIII. In the long run. Process. Another type of writing which involves chronological sequencing is what is known as process analysis. Like narration, a process is organized chronologically. But here, the natural time order is strictly followed, i.e. starting at the beginning of the process, and continuing step by step to the end. It involves how to give instructions and how to explain the process. Both are different in manner of telling. In the first one, you are telling someone to do something, whereas in the second one, you are mentioning step-by-step procedure to complete the task. Instructions. When you tell someone how to do something, how to perform a specific task, you are giving instructions. The instructions may involve giving directions for preparing a recipe, or informing someone about the procedure for conducting a scientific experiment. If your instructions are carefully thought out and planned, they should enable your readers to carry out the task successfully. To write accurate and easily understood instructions, you must keep the following things in mind. You must thoroughly understand the process that you are describing, and if possible, try it out yourself. This will help you anticipate any difficulties that might happen. Inform your readers of the special tools or materials needed for the job. These could be mentioned right at the beginning, in a section labeled, Tools Required, or Materials Required. This is to enable the reader to have all her tools ready before making a beginning. Alert your readers to be careful with steps that require precise timing or measurement. Warn your readers of potentially dangerous steps or materials. For example, if there are some other materials which are flammable, let your readers know before they reach that step. Give illustrations if you think your instructions will be better understood that way. Illustrations can simplify instructions by reducing the number of words necessary to explain something. You will be able to focus your attention on the steps making up the instructions, rather than on the description of the various parts of the apparatus or equipment. Use linking words which will make clear the sequence in which events or the stages in a process occur. The table below gives some common linking devices used when describing a process. Beginning steps. First, lie. Initially. To start with. Middle steps. Second. Third. Etc. Next. Then. After that. When. Subsequently. At the same time. Final steps. Finally. In the end. Lastly. Explaining a process. When you prepare instructions, your purpose is to help your reader to complete a specific task by following the step-by-step procedure you have outlined. If you are asked to write an explanation of a process, on the other hand, your purpose will be quite different. You will be telling the reader how something works or how something is done, but not something which he must do himself, herself. The process you explain may be an event that occurred in nature, the formation of the solar system, for instance, or an activity that requires human effort, for e.g. harvesting of rice. In the writing of instructions, you must thoroughly understand the process yourself before you explain it to the readers. Both instructions and explanation of a process are composed of steps arranged in a natural chronological order. The example below explains how black tea is made. Read it carefully and note how it is different from giving instructions. Example: black tea. The basic steps in making black tea from the raw leaf are withering, rolling, fermenting, and frying, drying. First, the leaves are transported from the plantation to the factory as rapidly as possible. The leaves are spread on racks to wither. This removes about 1/3 of the moisture, and the leaves become soft and pliable. After this, they are rolled to break the cells and release the juices, which are essential for the fermenting process. Then the leaves are spread out and kept under high humidity to promote fermentation, which develops the rich flavor of black tea. Then the leaves are dried, fried, until the moisture is removed. Spatial relationships. In the section above, you have looked at how paragraphs are organized according to a chronological sequence. Paragraphs can be organized according to space relationships. Very often you have to write about the location of a place, how a place is to be laid out, e.g. proposals for landscape work, or how a set of objects are connected, e.g. description of laboratory equipment. For this, you need to be aware of the spatial relationships involved. In a spatial sequence, you describe an object or a process according to the physical arrangements of its features. There is no one right pattern for spatial development. Depending upon the subject, you may describe its features from top to bottom, from side to side, from inside to outside, and so on. What matters is that the way you present your subject should be suited to what you are trying to say about the subject. For example, if you are writing about a river being polluted by chemicals, it is better to proceed along the course of the river as it passes by various sources of pollution. A description of the river from a single point of view on the bank, showing first what is near and then moving toward what is at a distance, may not be useful at all. Such an arrangement would limit you to one view of the river. When you write about the distant view, the distance might prevent your giving any specific details of pollution. Thus, a paragraph developed through a proper spatial relationship presents the point of view of the writer and at the same time turns the reader's attention in a certain direction. Supposing you were to write a paragraph describing your university campus, you might organize the description in different ways. 1. You might use some important landmark, for example, the library, and describe other places in relation to it. The order in which you discuss each place is not as important as its relationship to the landmark. 2. You might use an important landmark as the starting point, and move from it to the next place, onto another, and so on, perhaps ending at the original landmark. 3. Another type of development specially might give importance to the boundaries of an area. This would lead to a logical progression from one location to another. 4. Still another spatial development might stress the interrelationships between locations. Then, the order of description is not necessarily important. Generally, when you write a paragraph showing spatial relationships, your description is likely to include the following features: dimension, height, width, length, direction, up, down, north, south, shape, rectangular, square, proportion, 1/3, half. Visual aids. Spatial description often includes visual materials, such as a plan, a map, or a diagram. These will aid your understanding of a text. Writers use visuals to achieve different goals. Sometimes the purpose is to duplicate the information given in a text, so that the reader can visualize the relations more clearly. The visual can also clarify the rather complicated spatial relations set out in a text. Visuals are also used to supplement texts, i.e., to add further information to the text or to emphasize certain aspects of the information given in a text. Class relationships. There are various ways in which people organize the world around them. You have already read about two such ways: time and space. Another way to do it is by looking at relationships among objects or ideas and classifying them into groups according to their similarities and differences. Why do you need to classify things? Without classification, systematic thought would be difficult. For example, biologists classify forms of life in order to describe them better. They classify living things into plants and animals. They classify animals into vertebrates, having a backbone, and invertebrates. They classify vertebrates into mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Each class has its distinct characteristics, and so, if a biologist comes across some creature he has not met before, he has at least some way of describing it. Of course, classification depends on the purpose of writing. What are the factors involved in classification? The way we classify depends on what characteristics we think are important. For example, in biology, the presence of bones in the body is an important characteristic which differentiates animals, so we have categories of vertebrates and non-vertebrates. Generally, in academic writing, unless new discoveries are made, classifications are based on conventions, how others have done it, and on the purpose of writing. Of course, categories will change with time. English literature, for example, has traditionally been divided according to historical periods: medieval, Renaissance, 17th century, 18th century, Romantic, modern. However, it is possible to have an English literature syllabus in prose based on categories of form, e.g., descriptive prose, narrative prose, expository prose and introspective prose, or essay, short story, novel, one-act play, full-length play, biography and autobiography. When you organize your writing according to class relationships, you must keep in mind the following points. Use only one principle of classification, e.g., cars can be classified according to size, manufacturer, price, and country of origin. Choose the principle of classification suitable for your purpose. Be consistent. Once you have decided on a scheme of classification, stick to it throughout your composition. Mixing different ways of classification would cause a lot of confusion. For example, if you are classifying television programs, do not put morning shows, afternoon shows, evening shows with detective serials, UGC programs and children's programs. Make the categories as complete as possible. All individual units you are describing should fit into one of the classes you have adopted. In some cases, you may be faced with the prospect of an endless number of classes. For example, if you are discussing festivals celebrated in India, you may end up with a long list of types. It may, then, be a good idea to restrict yourself to, say, major festivals in India. Do not hesitate to acknowledge an overlap of categories in some cases. Classifications are necessary, but they can also be arbitrary, especially in subjective writing. For example, you may classify people as introverts and extroverts, but it is a good idea to mention that introverts can sometimes be outgoing among close friends, and extroverts can be shy in unfamiliar situations. Given below is a passage which is organized in terms of classification. Read it carefully and try to understand its arrangement. Example: a government's main source of revenue is taxation. Taxes are contributions that the people of a country pay to the government to administer the country's affairs. There are two main types of taxes: direct and indirect. Direct taxes are those that individuals or firms pay directly to the government. These will include income tax, paid by the individual, and corporate tax, paid by companies. Indirect taxes are taxes paid on goods and services, such as sales tax, entertainment tax, etc. Types of paragraphs. In the above sections, you have learned the elements that made a good paragraph and how to organize a paragraph in terms of chronological sequence, space relationship and class relationship. Now you will read about how to develop different types of paragraphs. Paragraphs can be developed in a number of ways, depending upon your purpose, the topic and the kind of reader you have in mind. The different methods of paragraph development can be considered in terms of two broad categories. I. Those which stay strictly within the scope of the topic, e.g. illustration, description, definition, and cause and effect. E. Techniques which involve a second topic, e.g. comparison and contrast. The method of development that you choose should be the one that will most effectively put across the point that you want to make, the point you have stated in your topic sentence. There are no rules about the kind of development to be adopted in any writing situation, although some topics lend themselves more readily to certain kinds of development than they do to other kinds. It must be realized, however, that you can combine more than one technique in composing a paragraph. Illustration. Illustration is expressed in different ways, sometimes through examples or through pictures, figures or tables. Giving examples is one of the easiest ways of developing a topic. When you give examples, you help the reader to understand a rather difficult and abstract generalization which may be contained in the topic sentence. You are also able to persuade the reader that the generalization is correct because there are examples to support it. Examples also add to the reader's interest. Often examples are introduced by using expressions like for example, for instance, an example, etc. When giving examples to support your topic sentence, keep in mind that there should be enough examples to support your point. Each example should be logically related to your main idea. Each example should be developed with interesting details. Note that the writer of the paragraph below does not merely list the examples, but tells us in what way each of these animals is helpless, the results of their helplessness and how they become self-sufficient. The examples should represent a reasonable cross-section of the group you are dealing with. Description. You may never have to write descriptions which are complete in themselves, but you may need to include descriptions in other pieces of writing, e.g. personal letters, narratives, reports and travelogues. You may like to describe people, places, objects, habits and conditions, as well as scenes such as accidents. Since description are concerned with detail, the larger and more precise your vocabulary, the better your descriptive writing will be. The following items are usually included in descriptive writing. I. Place and position, direction. E. Measurements, weight, size, volume, distance. E. Shapes and patterns. IV. Colors and textures. V. Materials and substances. When you write a description, keep in mind that you must begin with the general appearance. Select such physical details as will support the description of general appearance you have given in your first sentence. Describe each object by giving characteristics such as size, color, design, weight and material. In some descriptions, especially of scenes and landscapes, arrange your details in a definite order, such as near to far, high to low, left to right, etc. Some of the words used to indicate position are to the right, to the left, in the center, next to, along the right side, across, to the east, west, north, south, above, below, opposite, between, beyond, under, over, on the eastern end, alongside, beneath, surrounding, cause and effect. Besides using illustration and description to develop the topic of your paragraph, you may in some cases need to use the technique of cause and effect. You may, for instance, want to know the cause of your poor grades, or of a bus accident, or the effects or consequences of taking drugs, of deforestation, etc. Cause. Analyzing the cause can be quite a complex task. For example, a daughter's rebelling against her father and leaving home may have an apparent immediate cause, but there may also be a chain of causes going back into the past. Thus, there are likely to be many causes, not just one. When you write, you can follow any of these patterns. You may discuss one or more causal connections between events. You may trace a chain of events in which A is the cause of B, which is the cause of C, which causes D, and so on. The choice between one cause and several causes is often not a free option. Usually your topic will determine it. When you work with several causes or reasons, you face the problem of arranging them in a significant order. If the reasons follow a logical pattern, i.e. if the main event is caused by A, and are in turn by B, and B by C, the organization is predetermined. But sometimes the reasons or causes may be parallel, all contributing to the same result. Then, a good strategy is to begin with the least important cause and conclude with the most important. When developing a topic which is supported by reasons or causes, remember: 10. Make it clear whether you are dealing with an immediate cause or an earlier cause, a direct cause or an indirect cause. To consider multiple causes. To account for all the links in the sequence of causes. To write about all the causes or reasons with details. Example: hills and mountains are slowly worn away over thousands of years by the process of erosion. Erosion takes place everywhere on Earth. There are several forces of erosion: glaciers which carry rocks weighing thousands of tons, frost which causes small cracks on rock sides, strong winds which wear away exposed rocks in deserts. By far the greatest cause of erosion, however, is the action of water on rocks. Water carries chemicals dissolved in it that soften rocks. This softening is the first stage of erosion, called weathering. Rainwater falling on hills runs into streams and rivers, and these carry the weathered rock away. Millions of years in the future, your favorite hills will have been worn completely away by erosion. Analysis of the paragraph. 1. Topic sentence. Hills and mountains are slowly worn away over thousands of years by the process of erosion. 2. Causes of erosion. Glaciers, frost, strong winds, water. B. Process of erosion by water. 3. Summing up. In a million years, even your favorite hills will be worn away by erosion. You have just read and analyzed a paragraph which lists the causes of erosion. It follows a sequence where the less important causes are mentioned first, followed by the most important cause. Effects. Effects or consequences can be handled in much the same way as you handle reasons or causes. But keep in mind now the main idea is regarded as causing the consequences discussed in the rest of the paragraph. The paragraph you may write deal with only a single effect or refer to several effects. If several consequences are listed, you must be careful to distinguish between the major and the minor ones. Read the example given below to understand how effects are listed. Example: an earthquake strikes without warning. When it does, its power is immense. If it strikes a modern city, the damage it causes is as great as if it has struck a primitive village. Gas main burst, explosions are caused and fires are started. Underground railways are wrecked. Whole buildings collapse. Dams burst. Bridges fall. Gaps and crevices appear in busy streets. If the quake strikes at sea, huge tidal waves sweep inland. If it strikes in mountain regions, avalanches roar down into the valleys. Consider the terrifying statistics from the past. In the year 1755, Lisbon, capital of Portugal, the city destroyed entirely and 450 killed. 1970, Peru 50,000 killed. From Can We Stop Earthquakes? In World of Wonder, Cause and Effect. In the above two examples, you have read a paragraph which gives reasons to support a topic, and a paragraph which deals with effects. Often, however, you may note that cause and effect are more closely related, forming a chain where A gives rise to B, B to C and so on. In such a link, B is both the consequence of A and the cause of C. Definition. Often when you write, you need to explain what something is or means, especially if you feel that your reader may not be familiar with it. This generally happens when you use technical terms or when you want to give your own meaning to an ordinary word. The simplest way to define a term is by giving a synonym or by placing the word in a general class and then distinguishing it from others in that class. For example, term, widow, surgeon, class, a woman, a doctor, differentiation, whose husband died, who performs medical operations. Such definitions are rather formal in style and are generally found in dictionaries. Some concepts or ideas you know that cannot be defined in such a manner, and for this purpose extended definitions are useful. Topic sentences which relate to concepts such as freedom, democracy, etc. need the support of specific examples. In fact, both in your thinking and writing, you often require extended definitions. This can be done by adding details like uses, component parts, examples, being similar to something else, being different from something else, and stating what it is not. Sometimes a definition is used in the midst of other forms of writing, and sometimes the definition itself becomes the focus of a piece of writing. Example: a map is a representation of an area of land, sea or sky. Maps have been used since the earliest civilizations. Explorers find that they are used in rather primitive societies at the present time by people who are accustomed to traveling. For example, Arctic explorers have obtained considerable help from maps of the coastlines showing settlements drawn by Eskimo people. Occasionally maps show not only the roads, but pictures of other features. One of the earliest such maps dates from about 1400 BC. It shows not only roads, but also lakes with fish, and a canal with crocodiles and a bridge over the canal. This is somewhat similar to the modern maps of a state which show for each large town some feature of interest or the chief products of that town. C. Wiley. The analysis of the above paragraph is: definition. A map is a representation of an area of land, sea or sky. Generalization. Maps have been used, who are accustomed to traveling. Example: Arctic explorers. Generalization. Occasionally maps show not only the roads, but pictures of other features. Example: maps of both ancient and modern times. Comparison and contrast. So far you have seen ways of developing paragraphs which deal with only one topic. Sometimes a topic can be developed by showing how two things are alike or how they are different. Do you know that comparison and contrast are common devices in writing? Mainly because we tend to think that way. You know our decisions are often based on comparison and contrast. For instance, comparison and contrast dominate your thought if you decide to join a particular college or university, when you choose a career or a job, and even when you buy a particular brand of toothpaste. In your mind, you often try to compare your teachers, your neighbors, the cities that you have been to, the food served at different restaurants, and so on. Hence, comparison and contrast are a continuous process in everyone's lives. Generally, two items are compared and contrasted for three basic purposes. I. To point out distinctions in order to give information about the two things. E. To clarify the unfamiliar by comparing it with the familiar. E. To show the superiority of one thing over another. For example, comparison between two cars. There are two ways of arranging information when comparing or contrasting things. One is to write down all the main points about one of the things to be compared or contrasted, and then to take all the main points about the other. Person, thing 1, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 1, point 2, point 3, person, thing 2. The other way is to take each point in turn and to compare the two things in respect of each point like this. Person, thing 1, person, thing 2, point 1, right pointing arrow, point 1, point 2, greater than, point 2, point 3, point 3. Example, we live on the planet Earth, a ball of rock 12,750 kilometers in diameter. Like all planets, the Earth rotates on its axis and orbits the Sun. But the Earth is not alone. It has a companion on its travel, the Moon, which orbits the Earth once a month. But the two worlds are very different. The Moon is a dead planet. It has no volcanoes or geological activity. It is airless, waterless and lifeless. The Earth, on the other hand, is lush and fertile. It supports millions of living things, plants, insects, birds, animals and human beings. It has fascinating erupting volcanoes. Since the Moon has no atmosphere to protect it, its surface is heated to 105 degrees Celsius during its day, and cools to -155 degrees Celsius at night. In contrast, the Earth is covered by an atmosphere in which we can breathe, and which also keeps the temperature quite constant. The above paragraph you have just read is organized by talking about the Earth and contrasting it with the Moon. Moreover, the contrast is indicated with the signal words such as in contrast, but, on the other hand. Let us sum up. In this unit, you have been introduced to the elements that include the organization of a good paragraph, the topic sentence, the development of the topic, coherence and the use of cohesion devices. Also, the organization of paragraphs is also discussed in terms of chronological sequence, space relationship and class relationship. In chronological sequence you have learnt to write paragraphs based on natural and unexpected time, and these include biographical writing, narratives, instructions and descriptions of processes. When you write a paragraph based on space relations mentioned, you use both visual and non-visual cues, and finally when you write texts based on class relationships, you have to classify items to make it more meaningful. Further, different techniques to develop paragraphs are discussed: illustration, description, cause and effect, definition, comparison and contrast. These techniques can be used to write paragraphs on different topics.